Alright, third try at this video. I did make a walk and talk, but really wasn't good enough. It's too incoherent, and this one's probably going to be too incoherent too. Just responding to Nick and these other people, and they're kind of talking like we should do something now, which is really good, but the do is kind of like crazy. I don't even know exactly what Nick's saying. He won't say anything directly, which is really irritating. Because I think his do might be something like just learn how to be a slave or something. Sign I love you on the checks. I don't know. I don't know what he's saying. So anyway, but the other stuff he's pointing to, they're a little more explicit. But a lot of it just this wacky conspiracy mumbo jumbo, and I'm not hearing any solutions. Well, anyways, I'm going to post this as a response to the wepollock guy, because at least he's seems reasonable enough. You might be able to talk to him. I don't know. I've tried before. He doesn't really seem to want to engage in conversation, and that's sort of the downside here, is because people really can't get into an argument. They don't want to. They don't want this. They don't want to do this gleaning of the truth out of all of this stuff, all these theories and all this stuff. Somewhere we have to organize, and we're not going to be organized if there's Alex Jones clan and the whatever peace love clan and the what. I mean, there's just too many. It's too we're too disorganized as an as a group of people dissatisfied with the system, and the policy changes are just nothing. I mean, the we Pollock guy, okay, saying term limits. I mean, that's a big nothing. I mean, when was a bad politician replaced with a great politician? Never. Um, it's just with two-party system. You're not going to replace somebody with anybody ain't good. So what's the point? Um, and then the other solution is re-regulate the banking industry and separate these things. And I don't see what the point in that was. Um, there was money. The car industry was sort of an interesting one, because I sort of saw that evolve. When I remember when I bought my first official newish car, um, the dealership was so horny to get me to finance it. I wanted to just pay for it in cash, and it's like they didn't want to sell me the car unless I would finance it, because they were, as I learned later, they were making their money not on selling cars, but on selling financing contracts. And so they were basically in the banking business. They weren't in the car selling business. They were in the banking business. And then later, when they got desperate to sell cars, then they started cutting, the financing. So they weren't making any money on the financing anymore, because they're giving it away at 0% or whatever, as an incentive to get people to buy the cars. And so then it switched to exactly the opposite. It became a very bad business they were in. It was subsidizing their car sales, and so they were taking, they might have been selling cars, but they were losing money on the financing, and so what was the point? But that's sort of the evolution. Is once the consumers start getting tapped out, then you have to start, you know, in changing the incentives and playing more and more games. Um, look, obviously lending money um, was a good idea, especially when people first got into the whole credit card thing. There was lots of opportunity for creepy people to make lots of money suckering people with this easy paper, this easy plastic money stuff, because people didn't realize how much they're paying for stuff. They didn't see the real price tag when they bought it. And so, yeah, they can get away with this stuff. So for a few decades, it's just gotten out of hand. But that's not the root of the problem. And all these people are talking about solutions that aren't solutions. I mean, first, they don't fix the mess we're in now. So the mess we're in now is basically there's a very few people, a few thousand people, that hold trillions of dollars in IOUs. A few thousand people. And there's a few million people, maybe hundreds of millions of people, who have to pay those IOUs, who owe that money to those few thousand. And until that gets fixed, that problem, the whole economy is going to have to stop, because the consumers, the people with the IOU holding the debt, can't take on any more debt. So they're done consuming. They're finished. And so everything's going to have to be retracted. The whole economy is going to have to start shrinking. And that means people are going to get unemployed. And that means there's going to be more people who can't consume because they're not employed. And so then it's going to have to retract more because, it's that kind of a, once this virus starts, infecting, it's just going to do it until it gets to some, until everything's annihilated. And it's all going to happen because of this inequity, this disproportion, a few thousand people controlling all these assets. And we got to fix that. No one's suggesting fixing it, so I don't see how well, let's fix the banking system. What's the difference? I mean, if a few thousand people have all the assets, what are you going to fix it into? What's the point of regulating now? I mean, it's really closing the barn door after, everything is already left and is now miles and miles and miles away. It might even be already have grown old and died, and we might be on the third generation. So it's really too late for closing barn doors. So first we've got to fix that problem. We've got to get back to a neutral. We've got to get back to some sort of incentives that work, because the way the system is now, work ain't going to pay, because we're not working for each other's consumption anymore. I'm not working so you can consume, and you're not working so I can consume. Um, the only work to be done is whatever money, assets, the rich are willing to let loose. So they might hire you to do some work for them and spend some of their capital, but most of their capital is held to make money. It's not held for consumption, so they're not going to let you have any of it. So if we don't have a working economy where we can feed off of each other's consumption, all there's going to be left is taking the crumbs, the cake, from the rich. And that's the big problem here. I'd also argue that this whole theory that the banking thing is the problem, is that's what doomed the economy and all the rest of this stuff. I don't buy that argument. The problem is that the rich kept getting richer. Wealth was consolidating in fewer and fewer hands. And so you have all this capital, these assets turned into investment assets. And they're only going to be used when they can make more money. They exist to make more money. They don't exist to be depreciated like a car would be. So that's sort of another angle to this whole thing, is the car financing was always a trickier business, just because the asset depreciated. So as soon as the car company made the loan, the asset they held was already less valuable than the loan they had outstanding. So that industry was worse than the banking industry in a lot of ways, because the assets really weren't worth anything. Houses were sort of, it's kind of a substantial structure. It doesn't depreciate. It doesn't fall apart right away. You don't buy a house and the next day it's lost half its value. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. So anyway, so there's this organization thing again. I've suggested we've got to set up maybe an organization that just has issues, and they'll just be issued, 12 issues, 15 issues, whatever they are, and then create a mechanism where people can support those individual positions, those individual initiatives, if you want to call them that. And try to organize people that way, where we won't be able to step on each other's toes, where we won't be able to throw into the package poison pills, as they call it, where we can keep the legislation clean, unlike the Congress that pollutes everything with a bunch of crap, because of all the special interests that keep dirtying it up. So you can't support anything because it's been so bogged down with crap. Because we don't agree on the problem. We sort of agree on the basic, a few elements of fixables. Yeah, I'd say, okay, go ahead, re-regulate the banks, fine. I don't think it'll solve anything. Even term limits, I'll say, go ahead, fine, whatever. I don't think it'll fix anything at all, because I think we've got to restructure the whole democracy. But the point is, we really got to argue about this stuff. Somehow we got to communicate with each other and prove our points, and create some kind of atmosphere where we can get some kind of coalition behind these things. But yeah, I mean, I'm not opposed to supporting some percentage of what you suggest, maybe. Um, but yeah, I just haven't heard anything that's really going to fix the problem. So, out of time. Good time to stop is when I'm out of time. I have a few extra seconds, so I'm gonna, take my time hitting the button. But yeah, we gotta do something because this ain't working. I mean, we can keep talking about how we're gonna organize, but we never get around to doing it. So we gotta come up with a mechanism that makes it happen, and we haven't done that yet.